summer fade and winter draw near. My Lord, in your presence I live without fear. Through tempests, through snows, through turbulent tide, the touch of your hand is my strength and my guide. I ask for no riches that death can destroy. I crave only thee, your love and your joy. I ask for no riches that death can destroy. I crave only thee, your love and your joy. The dancers will pass, the singing must end. I welcome the darkness with you for my friend.
Well, good morning, everyone. Very nice to see you all. Nice to be home. How is your father? He's okay? Okay. All right. This reading is from Rays of the One Light by Swami Kriyananda. And these are parallel commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. And this is week 50, which is a thought in itself. We are on the 50th week of the year. Feels like we must have accomplished something by now. Living in the presence of God. Truth is one and eternal. Realize, realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. Matthew, we read of a king, capitalized, for the reference is to God, who welcomes certain devotees to the divine consciousness, saying, I was a-hungered, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me in. Naked, and ye clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and ye came unto me. The elect asked him when it was that they had served him in these ways. And the king answered, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. To see God as residing in every human being, as indeed he does, is to open oneself to limitless opportunities for serving him. Paramhansa Yogananda, in Autobiography of a Yogi, described a saint who lived in this consciousness as, quote, the greatest man of humility I ever knew. He described a seemingly chance encounter with this saint. Another day found me walking alone near the Howrah railroad station. I stood for a moment by a temple, silently criticizing a small group of men with drum and cymbals who were violently reciting a chant. How undevotionally they used the Lord's divine name in mechanical repetition, I reflected. My gaze was astonished by the rapid approach of Master Mahashaya. Sir, how come you here? Or how came you here? The saint, ignoring my question, answered my thought. Isn't it true, little sir, that the beloved's name sounds sweet from all lips, ignorant and wise? He passed his arm around me affectionately. I found myself carried on his magic carpet to the merciful presence. If you would see God, watch for him everywhere. If you would hear his voice, listen for it in all sounds and also in their supporting silences. If you would know God, seek his wisdom behind merely human knowledge. The Bhagavad Gita in the 6th chapter states, "One who beholds my presence everywhere, and all things dwelling equally in me, he never loses loving sight of me, nor I of him, through all eternity." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. I wanted to actually begin with a little commentary on the commentary. I mean, again, why do we even have these biblical commentaries? Why do we even have these commentaries on the Gita, which this, of course, is one? And again, this the reason why we read from this book every Sunday is because Swamiji did, and because Swamiji, in fact, wrote this book. But Swamiji did this because this is what Master did in his Sunday sermons and his Sunday services. In fact, if you listen to a few of the CDs of Master's voice, some of them are from his Sunday services. And he says we begin with a reading from the Bible, and then maybe he makes a quote reference to the Indian scriptures as well. But he was always comparing the Bible and the Gita. And Master did it because Swami Sri Yukteswarji did it. He wrote the Holy Science, which specifically lays out parallel passages from the Bible and the Gita, showing the same truths expressed in each. And why did Sri Yukteswarji write that book? Because Babaji asked him to. Specifically for that reason, for comparing the Bible and the Gita. And generally, he said, uniting the truths that have come down through the West and the East. He said, I'm concerned that these two families, you might say, may separate, and I want you to write this book to help to show them how their truths are really the same and to help bring them together. So when we read this book every Sunday, this commentary, it's because Babaji has ordered us to. And so again, if you think about this little book and how here we are sitting and how it's connected all the way up to Babaji. Because again, why? Babaji said it was the will of Christ. He and Christ together are bringing this union and seeing this underlying truth. So it's very nice also to see that the disciples of the Master, of Babaji, you could say, the chain of disciples from one to the next preserved this truth and tradition. Now, they didn't have such a hard time preserving it. They weren't tempted to do otherwise because they were avatars themselves. So we kind of, just to make sure the message God was communicated, Babaji had 4 more avatars or 3 more avatars come after him so that there wouldn't be any funny business. But you see, now it's upon us. Because, again, how do we know any of this beyond Autobiography of a Yogi? We only know because Swamiji has made it so clear in all of his writings, in the New Path especially, telling us basically about Master's life. Of course, the biography of Master as well. But also the way that Master was. On one level, you just can't really put that in a book. I mean, you can, and he certainly has. But still, the feeling, the vibration, little mannerisms you need, for example, which we have, in fact, so many videos of Swamiji telling stories of little things of Master. And people would often, for example, one person expressed surprise after seeing Swamiji give a public talk that Swamiji was so playful. And Swamiji didn't say, well, it helps open people up. And he didn't give any reason, like why he might do it. He just said, well, Master was. And when he wrote a chapter in the biography of Yogananda's salient characteristics, he would go out of his way to help people, and so on, these different ways. He was very humble and never placed himself above anyone. It was Swamiji's, I think, favorite chapter in the book, because he would often read from it at the time that the book came out. We reading that chapter, just said, well, but Swamiji, this is how you are. And it was no accident. On the one level, Swamiji, just being in tune with Master, absorbed Master's consciousness, and he more than absorbed, transmitted Master's consciousness. But also, I think on some points, though I don't know which, I think he made a deliberate effort to be more like Master. It doesn't mean he spoke with a Bengali accent, or it doesn't mean he, dressed like Master in one way, although actually he did. I mean, his orange robe that he would wear is what Master wore. And as you can see here, this is called a chadar, the piece of silk that goes over. And we're supposed to wear silk during our Sunday satsangs, but we said, it's Chennai. Silk and Chennai don't go well together if you have a choice. I know. Anyway, there's a big silk, forgive me to all the silk and the silk industry and all that. But still. But the point of all of this is not only for us to thank Swamiji, though that's a good point. Where would we be otherwise, really? Where would we be? How would we know anything of Master beyond Autobiography of a Yogi? But also for us to follow his example, and to follow Master's example, to try to be as ever we see, and from whatever we can gather from how they behaved, so we behave the same way. In fact, Sri Yukteswar put the point rather directly: learn to behave. Learn to behave. So when we say, look, I know I got irritated, but it was a really long flight and I had a headache, it's like, haven't learned to behave yet. And I'm speaking personally. We're not justified when we throw a temper tantrum. After all, and you started it. It's like, maybe, but let them learn to behave. We have to learn to behave ourselves. And the burden is on us. And why? Not just because he said, learn to behave or else hellfire and brimstone. We feel that hellfire and brimstone in ourselves when we do bad things. In fact, when we do something wrong, even a subtle thing, we can feel upset about it. I think Sri Yukteswar Master said that in the astral world, astral beings feel acute pain if they make some breach in basically proper behavior. Not because it's sort of like everybody has to look perfect and you coughed at the wrong time, in which case I'd be long gone from that plane today. But because it's just, I said something unkind. And to feel pain around that is a good thing. Because otherwise it's just like, what? Oh, well, why were you in the way of my hand? And so similarly, though, we don't want to overdo it, because then we can say, feel pain. I feel pain all the time. I feel pain even when I don't do anything wrong, because I'm so horrible. And that's taking the thing to the other extreme, and that's just as foolish. Okay? We're the equal of everyone on earth. God loves us just as much as everyone. Equal, remember. Not more equal. I think I'm a little more equal than you. No, it's not like that. Equal means equal. So be respectful to others, but our own behavior is on us. So that's what I'm saying. Make an effort. For example, Swamiji was so gracious, and he said Master was so gracious. And I heard something that I hadn't remembered. I heard recently something that I was reminded that Swamiji said, but I had forgotten it. That Master was so careful, even when he was meeting someone, and he didn't quite remember their name. When he knew them already, but was meeting them again, he would say, "What is your full name?" And it's exactly right. So sweet. Because he was careful. He knew. And he wanted, he was an avatar. Of course he could just say, "In your last life," he could do that. But on one level, he was also using his human personality. But more than that, he was showing us, why not? What's the harm? And in fact, the greatest joy of being gracious is not just to charm people, but it's that we feel that pure, happy light flow in our own hearts. And that kindness, that giving, protects us also. You are most protected when you are giving kindness, when you're giving friendship, when you're giving anything, really. Giving anything good is is its own protection. More than, I hope I'm protected. I hope nothing comes at me. I don't want to get hit. That's when we're worried about what we're receiving. And that puts a hole in our aura. So just give. I noticed, for example, someone came here and said, I don't have a job, so can I come serve at the ashram? And I thought about that because at first, some people can say that, saying, and while I serve at the ashram, can you also pay me? Because then I'll have a job. So that wasn't this person's intent. And then also, sometimes people say that, well, since I don't have anything else to do, I might as well go serve at some ashram. Again, better than serving the television. So, granted. But I realized, and I don't know if this person consciously knew this or not, but every time the person came to serve, he sort of looked a little better, and after the second time he had shaved, and after the third week he had put on nice clothes, and on the fourth week he was just coming in very just confident. How I thought, my God, he's going to get a job. Just because he not only because he was raising his energy, but in serving it was like, look, I'm going to just work for God, and then he'll give me a job. And I thought, so brilliant, get on monster.com or whatever the job thing is, and and a resume. Can I say that I'm really good? I know one word of German. Can I say I know German? And it's just like, instead I'm going to serve and then change my magnetism. So anyway, as I was saying, commentary on the commentary. There were so many thoughts that occurred to me. I wanted to just mention a few. Just to make the point obvious, the king is saying, I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. And all of his subjects are saying, when was that? When would you, as the king, ever be thirsty? Speaking of which. Not as the king, but as someone thirsty. When would you ever be thirsty? When were you ever suffering? I don't remember helping you. Just to make hopefully that's obvious. But that's why they asked him, when did we do this? And then he said, when you do it to the least of my brethren, you have done unto me. So remember that when you're helping others, you're helping God through them. Or if you want, you can think you're even helping Master through them. I say that because for some of us, thinking of Master or Swamiji gives a focus to our devotion more than just thinking of God in the abstract does at times. Because when we see Swamiji's face, when we see Master's face, instantly the heart opens, also in trust. So we don't trust necessarily that person will filter Master back to us clearly, necessarily. But with an open heart, we give. So I was in a car with somebody recently, and we had been waiting and actually holding up traffic because there was a perfect parking spot that another car was very slowly emerging from. And so beep, 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 and we were going to get this spot. And just as that person pulled out, another car came in and grabbed it. And so we said, well, I guess we got that parking spot through somebody else's car. Let me enjoy that my soul in that other body has now parked in that spot. Oh well, and then we went off and parked somewhere else. And another time we went to go park somewhere, and someone was standing there and wouldn't let us park. And so then we thought, okay, well, he's saving the spot for our soul in some other vehicle. It's just like, rather than go, just like, why not? Find something to celebrate. Find something to enjoy. Somebody grabs the last idli and takes it. Well, I'm enjoying it through somebody else. Again, just think of other people's joy that way too. I'm saying it because those are points where it feels kind of irritating. Obviously, if you serve them directly, it's much better and much more freeing. And I often remember this story of Master criticizing the the people who were chanting with very undevotionally and so on, remembering that Master Mahashaya said, isn't it true that the beloved's name sounds sweet from all lips, ignorant and wise? And for those of you who are on the Rishikesh trip, you can understand perhaps why I had to bring this story back to mind. Our first night in the hotel, there was basically an all-night concert kirtan going on. I think they stopped from 3 to 6, was it? I passed out at some point, but someone told me 3 to 6, but I went to sleep to them and woke up to them and all this. And at one point at 1 a.m., the guy stopped singing and they played some recording. And so I thought, okay, they're winding it down. And so I joked with someone, oh, it's intermission. Or I joked to myself, and no one was around at 1 a.m., but it's intermission. And then, sure enough, it was intermission after half an hour of whatever little pani and little samosas, and then they just went right back into it. So I was trying to find ways to be philosophical about the whole thing. As someone said, if you win a battle, you can walk around going, ha, 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 yes, I won. And if you lose a battle, you become philosophical. And so I was philosophical. After all, at least this man is singing cheerful songs. He's happy in his song. He was a good singer. And he also, there was one Om Namah Shivaya was thrown in there. Okay, Om Namah Shivaya, I know that one. And then I remembered this story, that just because it's so tempting to go, and then I just thought, listen, at least he's singing to God, and the other story of Master's, which I mentioned to some of you that night, is when Master was walking trying to meet Ram Gopal Mujumdar, the sleepless saint, and he was in burning paddy field after paddy field and getting lost, and all the villagers telling him just a krosha, which is like 2 miles more. And he was so worn out, he finally got to sleep in some farmer's house, and the nearby villagers were doing this loud kirtan all night long when he was exhausted. And so it was so Master had to go through that little thing, and so we had to go through our little thing, and so on. So again, it's just find a way to just go, oh well, and just laugh at the divine Leela, and then suddenly it becomes fun. And then, and this also is this Swami would quote this too. This when the Master Mahashaya appears before Master said, how did you come here? How did you get here? Why are you here? And the saint, ignoring my question, answered my thought. And that is so important to remember, because that's what saints do. And that's often why saints are misunderstood, because they seem to miss the point. When the story of the man who asks Master a very intellectual question, very complicated question, something like, in the cosmic ground of dwelling of all being, which is absolute existence, which came first, the existenceness of existence, or, just some useless question. And Master just said, love God. And then you know how the story goes. He said, love God, and left, because the man wasn't getting it. In fact, the man wrote a book explaining and gave talks as a teacher saying, I met this Yogananda saint, but he missed the point. And so we laugh at that, and I do too. But keep in mind, when do we think it ourselves? Well, I think in this, I don't think, actually, technically, that's not correct. And then we find that, or I don't agree, I don't like that, and I don't. It's fine. It's whatever. Yeah, you always have to have some of this, and in that part we sort of hold. Well, Guru is missing the point. It's okay to feel that way. In fact, it's good in a way to feel that way, because it means we're bumping up against our boundaries. It means we're stretching beyond our normal capacity. If we are always just in a flow, it means we're not being tested. Now, inside we can always be in a flow. I don't mean that if you're suffering it's good. But generally, we are most motivated to learn when we are suffering. And so in that sense, yes. I mean, Master said, to God, why do you teach people through suffering? And Master said, I know the answer, but I don't like it. And the answer is because it works. And just joy and peace and all comforts doesn't work for us to learn. We can learn during such times. But in the astral world, you have all comfort. And basically, astral world, in terms of your company that you keep, is more or less like Ananda. Everybody's at the same spiritual vibration as you. I mean, that's nice. Some of us have experienced that recently in the pilgrimages and the traveling. It's really nice. But if there isn't challenge, if there isn't this push to grow, then we don't grow. In fact, astral beings, most of the time when we're on the astral world, I should say, we don't grow much at all. It's too much enjoyment. We're basically taking a break. It's hard to be motivated to grow. Excuse me. But on earth, we grow a lot. So, that's one of the reasons why suffering comes. And in fact, most of us have come onto this path because of some suffering that we went through. That we said, okay, enough. There must be something more than this, because whatever I'm doing isn't working. Or it was more a subtle thing. Like a friend of mine who got the perfect house, the perfect husband, the perfect job. Everything was perfect, the furniture was moved in, the pictures were all straightened, and she sat down in the middle of the room and cried. Is this it? Now I have everything. Nothing's left to want. House, husband, this, that. And I still feel miserable. And so sometimes that's the sort of, you could say, existential or fundamental misery that's just like there's just not something, I'm not fulfilled. And St. Augustine gave us the answer to that in his prayer, saying, Lord, thou hast made us for thyself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in thee. So we have a built-in hunger, a built-in yearning for completion, a built-in insufficiency until we become fully complete in God. So if you feel that hunger, if you feel that yearning, if you feel that disappointment with the world, be glad. Because you know where to look to be fulfilled, for that cure, for that healing. And that's something nobody can teach you. And you can't teach anyone else. You see sometimes parents trying to control their children, trying to say, I want to protect you or save you from this mistake that I think you're making. Or, I want you to have a better life than I did, but so I also want to just say, if you would just listen and do this, you will find it's better. And sometimes they're right. At least in what they're saying is true. But it may be that that's a lesson that the child has to learn on its own. And that you can't learn it unless you learn it on your own. It's like, a driver's license test. You can't take the driver's license test for somebody else and then say, here it is. No, you can't. You're having trouble taking turns without crashing. No problem. Here, I'll do it. And then here's your license. Now, I've heard that Agnell has some methods for... Anyway. Never mind. I won't say more on camera. But just to say, in general, you can't take somebody's vision test for them. What kind of glasses should I get? Oh, here, look at this. I did that with my mom. She was taking a vision test, and there was a doctor saying, read the third line, and I was sitting there, Q, X, P, F, and if looks could kill, I wouldn't be standing here today. He was so... Now I can't use that line. I'm just like, okay, sorry. I was just so pleased I could read it. Excuse me. The saint... Okay, I will try for plan B here. Yeah, thank you. The saint, ignoring my question, answered my thought. We saw that with Master in so many different situations, especially where he said, love God, where Swamiji gives so many examples in his writings of Master where Master was directly addressing the point, but Swamiji didn't realize it perhaps at first, or other disciples didn't realize it. When Master was cooking and there was a disciple nearby wanting to she was sitting and enjoying, but then she thought, well, I might as well do something while I'm here, so she thought, I'll just clean up after him. And so then the more he was cooking, the more pots got messier and messier and so on, and she thought, I've never seen such messy cooking, and so she was struggling to keep up with him. Finally she said, forget it, I'm just going to herself, I'm just going to sit quietly. And then she saw him smile, and then he didn't say anything, and then she noticed that he wasn't messing anything up anymore. And he didn't say, so you see, the moral of the story is... He never said anything. But she reflected on it, and suddenly she got the lesson from it. Obviously, restless activity, one of the lessons, activity for its own sake, is not needed, especially in the presence of the Guru. I mean, how many of us would love to have been able to just sit and watch Master cook in our presence, in his presence? Just once. And there she was, watching him cook. And so, again, we have these opportunities now in different ways. And at other times, or other people, or future, or past, well, not past, but people may say, oh my gosh, you had that opportunity, to meditate in Swamiji's cave in Rishikesh, or, any kinds of things, which other people can have. But in other words, we yearn for the opportunity that one disciple had with Master, thank you, or that people had with Swamiji. But we shouldn't overlook the opportunities we have now that are equally enviable in their own way. Not that we should envy anything, but in other words, that just as they, I'm sure, were appreciating, so we can appreciate. One man told me when he went to Swamiji's house in Pune after Swamiji's passing, that he noticed the fans, where if you've been there, the fan posts are very long. And then the fans are basically just about at this height. But the ceiling is much higher to try to help with the heat. And these, the pole that the fan is connected to, the fan pole, I'm sure it's called, technical name, is so long. And it kind of is striking because you don't normally see that in houses. And he said to Narayani, have the fans always been like this? And she said, yeah. And he thought, well, why have I never seen them? And then he said it's because whenever he was going to Swamiji's house, it's because Swamiji was there. And he was going to see Swamiji. And so the whole time he was there, he never took his eyes off of Swamiji. He never looked up. He was always looking at Swamiji. So he never even saw the fans that were right there. And so just to say, I mean, people do appreciate the opportunities that they have. That's an example. We can appreciate. I know you all do appreciate. Someone was saying, we didn't have a Sunday satsang. It was a problem. And I thought, okay, my task is complete. Everyone likes satsang now. Very good. Very glad. But also to say, there was one man who was telling Swamiji, I'm about to celebrate my 10th year at Ananda, and I'm feeling rather glad about it. And Swamiji said, listen, age means nothing. How old are you? And the man said however old he was. And Swamiji said, listen, when I was 22, Master had me lecturing out in public to adults. Age doesn't mean anything. And the man was a little embarrassed because Swamiji just said, it doesn't mean anything. And I wasn't saying age. I had been here, 10 years. It wasn't my age. And then later he reflected on it and realized that thought was always in the back of his head. Well, but I'm young. And because I'm young, I act a certain way. And because I'm young, I kind of defer this way or that or whatever. But that age, his physical age, was very much, so much on his mind he didn't even see it. So Swamiji didn't misunderstand. Swamiji didn't not hear. Swamiji didn't get it. When there was a lawsuit between SRF and Ananda, when it started out, SRF was saying, we have the copyright to Yogananda's name and all his pictures. So you can't use his picture or his name in any of your publications or in any public event without written permission from us. And Swamiji said, which you can imagine how eager they would be to grant. And so, I mean, just think about it. We couldn't have the Guru's pictures on the altar. That was what the lawsuit was about, one of the things. And so I say it too because lawsuits are kind of like, and there was sort of a movement among some of the younger generation at Ananda Village saying we don't want to really bring up those dark days of discord and, that you all were fighting, but we are not going to fight, or whatever they thought. And it's like, remember, if we lost the lawsuit, we couldn't have the Gurus on the altar. We couldn't say the name Yogananda in a public setting. So that's what it was about. And so when the lawsuit started, they were attacking through copyrights, saying we have the copyright. And so Swamiji said, they're after the copyrights to my books. And people said, Swamiji? No, they're saying that they have the copyrights to their books and to Master's books. They're not after, how can they be after the copyrights to your books? And so, 12 years later, at a certain point in the lawsuit when they were going to claim damages, you have to compensate us for all this, trying to use our good brand name and all that. They said the only way you can compensate us is to sign over the copyrights to all of Kriyananda's books so that we can then have the income from that. Now, ignoring the fact that, yeah, I know, it hurts a little bit, but still, it's like 12 years later is when they revealed that that's what they were doing. And Swamiji saw it on day one, and nobody believed him. No one could understand how could it be your copyrights? Again, you can understand that. I can understand it too, the confusion. Like, I'm sorry, Swamiji, I don't, if you really get it, he got it. And there was another time when there was Swamiji arrived in an airport, landed in an airport, and the people were gathering around to see him and just so excited. And there was one person who was, it's hard when you're in a crowd to not just kind of go, over here! Because you just want Swamiji, and so the person, especially because he's saying, hello, how are you? And then he says, hello, how are you? And then he skips over you and then says, hello, how are you? Just like, are you going to make another pass? Because you didn't say hello. And so Swamiji was greeting people. And you have to understand, if you've ever taken a flight, which most of you have, you get off the flight. And if it's a long international flight, you're a little tired. And, you say hello, and can we go? But people are, like this, which of course he understood. But he basically skipped over one person one too many times, I guess. And the person just sitting there just basically told me, he kind of shouted in his head, I love you. And Swamiji went like this, if it was Rajesh, say. Swamiji and just turned back instantly and said, how are you? And the man said, oh, fine, sir. But it was in that moment of that silent shriek of love. Somehow shriek of love doesn't sound like, but call of love. But it was a real shriek. It was. Out of desperation, Swamiji heard it. Swami heard the thought. Swami answered the thought. And he does it now. These aren't just stories to say, how lucky everybody was or what miracles they were. He does it now, and you know that. You open a book, and the book answers you. You see a video, and he describes exactly what you're going through. Or you have a question. Or you tell a story about Swamiji's life, then you play a recording, and you hear him telling the same exact story that you just told, or that you just remembered. And he's telling us in so many ways, I'm here. Master is too. But again, just as Master flows through Swamiji, so we must invite Master and Swamiji to flow through us. It doesn't just that we receive. What if Swamiji had just received? Which is very tempting as a disciple to just, I want to sit at the feet, I want to get free. Everybody else, good luck. I'm here for myself. It's not a bad thought. But in fact, Master said to Swamiji, apart from Saint Lin, Rajarshi Janakananda, every man has disappointed me. And he said, and you mustn't disappoint me. And Swamiji wondered about that at first because he knew the men were great spiritual souls. And I mean, Gyanamata was a beautiful soul, and Oliver Black was even more self-realized than she, according to Master. I don't know how to understand that one. And so he couldn't have disappointed Master spiritually. But what Swamiji saw was that he said none of the men who, especially in those times, but in general, were pushing the work forward. They were on the front lines in giving the talks and so on. The women disciples were more behind the scenes, but running the whole place. That they hadn't grasped the importance of his world mission, or they hadn't hadn't felt a personal responsibility to help. I mean, if you feel grateful for all the things the Guru has done, don't you want to help him do what he's doing? Some of the people at Ananda village, or at least one person said in the early years, that it was a little bit like that with Swamiji. It was kind of watching, what's he going to do next? And then it slowly dawned on her, maybe I should help him. And I don't mean help him by like fluffing his pillow and all this, but maybe I should also try to, share Master's vibration. Maybe I should really care about this new thrust that he's doing to make other people know Master. I know Master. I know Kriya. So I'm content. But how did I know Kriya? How did I learn Kriya? How did I hear of Master? How did it happen? Because somebody else put a brochure in my book. Somebody else gave me Autobiography of a Yogi. Somebody else, started a center, and I just walked into it. Somebody else decided Ananda, Swamiji in this case, should now be in India. You see, it's all because of the work of others. That's the only way we found out about anything. It's the only way I found out about anything. And so we want to also push that forward. And I know you all do. So it's not as if, really. But still, think about it, and even in little ways. And most of all, though, what's most convincing, I think, is just by the joy and the calmness that radiate from your own presence. In other words, share what you can share easily. Doesn't mean you have to then grab, excuse me, do you want to hear about Yogananda? It'll change your life. It will. Not everybody's open to that. I wouldn't have been open to that if someone in the park had sort of waved the book at me. Maybe if I saw Master's face, maybe I would have. But otherwise, people need to be approached in their own way, or not approached, perhaps attracted. And those who are in tune and who are ready will be attracted. But it's up to us to put out that magnetic call. And so I wasn't planning on mentioning this because I've mentioned it a lot, but it's just like with the growth of the Sangha, the growth of the community, the growth of the center. It's like, listen, you just end up having 7 more Rajeshes. And I know we can't have 7 more, we can only have 1. But I'm just saying, it's not that you have these swollen ranks of faceless people who now are just getting in the way in the food line. It's that you have 3 more Sujatas, 10 more Kartiks, 5 more Tulasis. In other words, people you know and care for. Each one has a face. You went to the choir, didn't say too many singers up in Delhi. Now there's too many singers. Each one was singing, and it's singing their own part. But each one was unique, but also a part of the whole thing. And so on. The people you met. It wasn't like, oh, who are you? Are you one of those extra people? There's no extra people. And so, in other words, you'll have that many more close friends. As one man was trying to explain Ananda to his relatives, because they wanted to know why was he celebrating his birthday at Ananda instead of coming and being with his family. And he said, I really felt to just share this time with 80 of my closest friends. Because that's how it feels. At Ananda, you have 80 closest friends. And, whereas in the family, anyway, I'm not going to, a friend of mine was telling me recently that the person was enjoying going to Gurgaon and Delhi for the Spiritual Renewal Week, going to Rishikesh, and then going also getting back to Chennai through the rains, traveling together. And the person was saying it's nice to be with devotees because the consciousness is uplifted. Because when you're traveling with family, you basically gossip and say, oh yes, abadiya, very bad. You see, it's just always what can we do to bring the energy down. And when you're with devotees, you often receive that energy, but also should contribute to that energy. How can we lift the energy up? And so I did want to also end, though, on a serious note with, because we're in the middle now of the Christmas season, which we normally have at least a week or two to get into it. And because of being in New Delhi and because of the rains, we sort of missed a little bit of our ramp up to Christmas time. And this is Master's Prayer to Christ from Whispers from Eternity. O Christ, thou rarest flower of hearts, thou didst sail the storm-tossed lake of prejudiced minds. Its evil-scented, gloomy thought waves lashed thy lily-tender soul. They crucified thee with their evil, yet didst thou shed on them the aroma of goodness and forgiveness, and help them to be purified by remorse, to make them attractively sweet-scented with thine all-loving soul flower. O thou great lover of all error-torn brothers, an unseen monument of the mightiest miracle of love was established in every heart when the magic of thy voice uttered, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." Thou hast healed the cataract of hatred. We have now grown to see thy truth. Love thine enemies as thyself, for they are thy brothers, though sick and sleeping. Thou hast taught us not to increase their fevered blows of hatred with the bludgeons of revenge. Thine undying sympathy has inspired us to heal our brothers, suffering in their delirium of anger, with the soothing salve of divine forgiveness. Thy crucifixion reminds us of the daily crucifixion of our own fortitude by trials, of our wisdom by ignorance, of our self-control by the scathing touch of temptation, and of our love by misunderstanding. Isn't it so sweet? He doesn't say, it's not over, but he doesn't say our love by hatred, but our love by misunderstanding. And sometimes that's the greatest pain, is when love we give is misunderstood. Or when we give love but are misunderstood and love isn't given back. It sometimes hurts much more than just some random shout of hatred. Thy test on the cross proved the victory of divine wisdom over ignorance, of thy divine soul over flesh, of thy happiness over pain, and of thy love over hatred. So are we heartened to bear our own crosses bravely and with faith. Teach us, when we are crucified by harshness, to pour out only sweetness, to bear with calmness the assaults of worry, and to give understanding unceasingly to those who unjustly hate us. O Shepherd of souls, wandering hearts are seeking of themselves the one fold of divine devotion. We have heard the ever-calling music of thy infinite kindness. Our one desire is to find our home in thee, to receive the Cosmic Father with the joyous open eyes of wisdom, and to know that all of us are sons of our own one God. Teach us to conquer the Satan of dividing selfishness, which prevents the gathering of all our brother souls into the one fold of spirit. Calling to one another by the watchword, love him who loves you, and love all who love you not. Let us rally beneath the canopy of the universal oneness of the Christ. Amen. And this is a letter that Swamiji wrote at Christmas time a few years ago, 2011. And he sent this letter out to everybody. And so I wanted to read it. And just to put this in context, Christmas is a very joyful time, a very joyous time. And not just if you have a particular devotion to Jesus, but also because of his birth was also, though a reality, was also a symbol of, in the darkest hour, how the divine comes again to not only save the world, but also to save us. And so we see it in the birth of Krishna. And I don't know if we'll do it this year, but when we were reading, we would sometimes read, as Swamiji would, the story of the birth of Christ and the story of the birth of Krishna, and it's amazing how similar they are in their circumstances. But it's the same thing, that evil had basically gotten to be too much, and so God in form came. But again, not just as an avatar to put virtue back on its throne again, which is wonderful, but also to help you, to help each one of us to find God personally. And it's very possible that you were with Christ in his when he was incarnated on earth. Very possible. In a few days, we'll all be celebrating a precious memory, the birth of Jesus Christ in a humble manger. We think sweetly of that innocent, all-loving baby. I remember a picture I saw in Greece where the Virgin Mary looks at her baby with tears of grief. And I asked a monk, "Why is she crying?" He answered, "Because she knew how much her little child would have to suffer." And I thought, no, he won't suffer. His body will suffer, but not he. He will know only bliss. His pain will not be for himself, but for our suffering, because we are blind and self-willful, and because we ignore all that he truly represents, the divinity of our own being. I wrote you not long ago of a dream I had, in which my enemies tried to burn me at the stake, and then friends of mine saved me. I was indifferent alike to the burning and to being saved. That certainly must have seemed extreme to some of you. But I had that dream because of a lifelong practice I have made that might help you, for me to share with you. I have, for many years, deliberately imagined the worst thing that could possibly befall me, and then asked myself, could I accept that as a gift from God? Death? Simple. I've never been afraid of death. But condemnation by God? Oh, that would be terrible. And that is the thought I was forced to endure in 1962 when SRF threw me out. For me, it was 1,000 times worse than physical death. It seemed to me that my guru, and through him, God, had rejected me. I felt completely abandoned in a cold and empty universe, and for reasons I simply could not understand. The only thought to which I clung desperately was, even if you abandon me, I will never abandon you. It was from that point on that I was able, it was from that point on that I was able, slow, step by step, to reconstruct my life and to accomplish the work God has given me to do. Christmas is a time of rejoicing, but let us also remember that all rejoicing in this world is two-edged. Joy alternates constantly with suffering. It cannot be otherwise, for this very world is created on the principle of duality, of plus and minus, of ups and downs. When all the waves subside, we are left with the calm ocean of God's bliss. Nothing else is real. So even in this season of rejoicing, I invite you to consider my little practice. If you will, you may turn it to good use in your life also. As Jesus said, it must needs be that sorrows come. Well, Jesus used the word scandals, but he had to mean also sorrows of all kinds. The way to remain, as Yogananda put it, unshaken amidst the crash of breaking worlds, is to imagine the worst, even now, and to school oneself to accept it as a mark of God's love. He never gives you any test without at least as great a blessing. His final message to all of us is not suffering, but bliss. When Jesus died on the cross, his spirit knew no pain. It knew only joy. His suffering was for ignorant humanity, which ever rejects God's love for a pale substitute, which gives nothing but suffering in the end. Remember, outside of God there is no lasting happiness or fulfillment of any kind. Whatever you do in life, let the birth of Jesus be your constant reminder to live above everything else for God. May inner Christ joy be yours this Christmas season. With love in Him, Swami Kriyananda. And I think one way we develop that feeling of being able to accept the most difficult test is through the joy we feel in meditation. Because when you meditate and you feel that sense of security and joy, you know nothing that happens to me matters. Then we come out of meditation and suddenly it matters again. But in that feeling of meditation, which if you don't meditate, how do you ever feel that? If you've never meditated, you've never reached that point in meditation, how would you know what that feels like? That's why meditation is such a gift. As Krishna says, even a little practice of this inward religion will free you from dire fears and colossal sufferings. You don't have to be afraid of death anymore. You don't have to be afraid of losing anything, because you reach that feeling, I know I am inwardly fulfilled. But one of the things I can imagine, as Swamiji said, the worst would to feel rejected by Master. And that's how he felt. And that's as he proved that it wasn't the case at all. In fact, later, and even then, he said it was the greatest blessing in my life, though he didn't see it at the time. Meaning, we may not see it at the time. But just to say you can't be rejected by Master any more than you can be rejected by God. So if that's on your list of fears, you can strike it off. And you can go to the next one. But that one you don't have to worry about. And if you don't have to worry about that, then you don't really have to worry about anything. Just like the words of that song. The touch of your hand is my strength and my guide. I ask for no riches that death can destroy. I crave only thee, your love and your joy. The dancers will pass, the singing must end. I welcome the darkness with you for my friend. God bless you all.